I'd like to welcome you this afternoon to Screen Queensland's multi-platform and gaming presentation. And just a couple of things, hopefully your mobiles are turned off. And what, I'd like to see all the Screen Queensland staff actually reaching for their mobiles, very nice. And what we're going to do today is actually do a presentation after the presentation of Screen Australia. Then we can kind of get some interaction going with the audience as well, so feel free to ask some questions after that presentation. But first of all, I'd like to present our guests today. Brian Lowe, CEO of Screen Queensland. And Justin Halliday, Investment Manager of Screen Australia. And we've got Morgan Jaffet, who's a co-founder of Defiant Development. And I think we might just start with asking each of our guests to provide a little bit of background on each other. So, Brian?
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everybody. Well, probably some of you know me, but anyway, I've been at Screen Queensland about 9 months. I'm from Sydney, but I'm from England originally, as you can hear, and been in the screen industry for 100 years. Since the 70s. Gosh, that's quite shocking. But anyway, all areas of it, film, television, video, new media, as it continually evolving when new media was home entertainment, and in all areas of production, distribution, finance, locally, internationally. So it's particularly, I guess, I've worked mainly in the private sector, so companies in the UK like Granada and Thames Television. Over here I ran Virgin for a while, which film and TV, when they were involved in that. And I started up some production finance ventures with Macquarie Bank and the Nine Network. And I've VP'd a lot of films and TV and done all sorts of stuff. And at various times got involved in, as I say, what's euphemistically has been called new media. So it's been particularly interesting to see the success of some new media and the visible failure of others, like talking books, which seemed like the best idea in the world and never quite took off, video, which kind of took off quite well, and CD-ROMs, which kind of didn't really take off, should have done, and of course now the rest is history with games, and it's all very exciting, and so we're here to talk about that. But hopefully we're bringing the disciplines of trying to understand consumer behaviour and the marketing of content and entertainment to people locally and internationally, and all the brutal business methodologies and financial disciplines that are required to succeed in that area. So that's me, and I'll be talking more about what we do at Screen Queensland, or we're trying to do in this new area, or emerging area, a little later.
And by the way, I'm Jenny Hughes, Head of Screen Culture at Screen Queensland. And Justin?
Hi guys, Justin Halliday here. I'm an investment manager at Screen Australia. I've only been with Screen Australia for about 4 months, and before that, for the 20 years before that, I was in game development. So they brought me on because they've got a couple of new funds, which are the games funds. There's a games enterprise and games production fund, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, hopefully. And during my time as a games developer, I worked at Beam Software, which became Melbourne House, which became Infogrames Melbourne House, and Atari Melbourne House, and all of that. And at another company which was called originally IO Gurus, then became Transmission Games, and then went out of business. So that wasn't quite so good. Not my fault, actually. Don't have to worry about that. And as I say, I've recently made the transition from game development actually into games investment manager for Screen Australia. And I can introduce you now to Morgan Jaffet.
Yay.
So my name's Morgan Jaffet. I run Defiant Development, which is a game developer locally. We're about 14 people at the moment. And we've been running for about 3 years. We've produced a number of games. For both PC and mobile, we primarily do mobile development these days, although we're doing a little bit in the PC space. We do our own development, we do our own publishing, we work with publishers, we work up and down the scale. Before that, I was a game developer for a number of years. I came in from a writing background, and I've worked for a number of Australian game developers, international game developers, Australian-owned companies, internationally owned Australian companies, and we've had a very good 3 years. We've managed to grow over that time, get some successful titles out there, get out to now over 10 million people, have success in both locally and internationally in very strongly, and we kind of experiment in both the premium games and the free-to-play space. That's a little bit of this.
Very impressive panel, that's all I can say. Before we head off into the Screen Australia presentation, I'd just like to throw to Brian. I mean, Screen Queensland actually recently completed its review and consultation with the screen industry on its multi-platform and game strategy. And I know it's just before the board being approved, so Brian won't be able to go into a great deal of detail, but perhaps if you can provide us with an overview.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Well, obviously, we have kind of had a bit of a toe in the water, and I suppose we're now still learning and listening to how we should get involved in multi-platform and games. And, I suppose we've got a foot in the water now. We're trying to we're building our program this year. We're allocating a little more money than we did last year to games, early stage and later stage and production. So we hope it's going to sit nicely alongside what Screen Australia have on offer, which is, as I understand it, and Justin will be able to explain in more detail, more later stage and production. So we're trying to stay pretty flexible because it's early days, and obviously the nature of content is enormously diverse and the way that is applied. So, but it's going to cover, I think, a pretty broad range of multimedia and multi-platform and games content. Interactive online, mobile dramas, webisodes, documentary, narrative-rich computer games and apps, narrative-driven cross-platform projects. I suppose that pretty much covers a broad multitude of sins, but really we're going to look at individual applications. The key for us is a plan to market and monetize the content that is on offer and being proposed. And I suppose we bring other disciplines of our range of commissioning and distribution expertise to the table there. So that's going to be a key. It would be foolish of us to be too prescribed, I think, at this stage, because the area is so enormously diverse and evolving. Broadly speaking, in the early stage, we have a sort of a figure of about up to $10,000 for a early stage development, which can create a range of proof of concept materials, and depending on how much you're looking for and what the concept is, we would require appropriate marketplace letters of interest or plans to monetize. And beyond that, there's a second stage, which is a later stage and could also involve production, which is up to $50,000. So it's a little bit vague, but I think that's probably, flexibility is probably on our side and your side, because it will allow you to present content and opportunities to us and talk it through case by case. And hopefully that's going to sit rather nicely alongside the much bigger chunks of money that Screen Australia potentially have on offer. We will, as I say, be focused particularly on credible teams who really connect with the market and understand how they're going to turn that into a marketable product with distribution partners. So that's going to be key. It is an area of real interest for Screen Queensland because we see this as an area where we can make a real revenue return. I mean, often in film and TV, we're kind of tail end Charlie subsidising content. So I'd actually want to take heart from the fact that in your sector, there is the potential to monetize more effectively. And if you guys can prove to us that we can get our money back, or some of our money back, and make profits, then there's going to be much more money on the table. So I think that's really critical, and it really distinguishes multi-platform and games from traditional film and TV public investment, where, as most of you would know, most of our money is lost. So I think that's on the side of the scheme and the side of you guys here today. So we're not into multi-platform marketing of existing properties. We're not into. It's not a marketing fund. It's a fund to create content that's going to exploit it in all these new areas. So we're, as I say, we're being a bit vague, but we're really going to throw it over to you to pitch to us as you make applications. And we want to create an open door to say, okay, if you've got a plan to get into this space, create content in an innovative way that is consistent with our kind of screen agenda. You know, it doesn't mean a sort of a weather app. We've sort of said, well, do you invest in weather apps or, you know, weight loss applications? And clearly that isn't what we do as a kind of screen subsidy organisation. Then we're very open to hearing what you're doing and how you plan to develop it. So that's pretty much our plan. You know, deliberately vague, but there is money there. It's a lot more money than there was last year, and we hope we've tried to construct it in a way that complements what Screen Australia are doing with their much bigger fund. So hopefully we can grow things locally and take them nationally, and create a kind of integrated financing and business approach. That's pretty much what the plan is.
Oh, good. Well, that means there'll be lots of things funded by Screen Australia that come from Queensland, perhaps. Anyway, I'll throw to Justin now. We can actually go to the presentation, and
Sure.
then we can have a chat afterwards, and throw to our wonderful guests here. I think. In the back.
See if this thing works.
No, maybe not.
There we go.
Yeah, I might sit down so I can see.
So, yeah, if you guys want.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a couple of quick preliminary questions. For the audience, just so I know, put up your hand quickly if you're involved in the kind of film side of things and you're looking at doing film sort of work, okay?
Yeah.
And games, people looking at games, great, okay. You? Games.
Both.
Right, Mike and I are the two investment managers at Screen Australia. Mike is not here because he lost a bet. I won. But basically, Mike has a great deal of experience. He's been at Screen Australia for almost 10 years. He's done a lot of the multi-platform work and a lot of the work that went into actually getting these two new funds that I'm going to talk to you guys about set up at Screen Australia. So you guys have him to be thankful for, or we, the funds do. This is me down the bottom. If you want to contact me at any point, there's my email address there. If you care, it's there. If you want to, you can talk to me later. So basically, Screen Australia at the start of this year set up two new funds. Basically they're formed under the interactive and multi-platform banner. We wanted it to be games, interactive and multi-platform, and call ourselves the GIMPs, but they wouldn't let us. So it's just GIMPs at the moment. The two major funds here are Games Enterprise and Games Production. We recently announced the results of our Games Enterprise Fund, where we funded 10 companies over 3 years. Luckily for me, one of them was Morgan's company, who's going to be talking to you guys earlier, Define.
Yay.
So, you know, where we basically looked at over 30 companies around Australia that applied to us, and you know, hopefully chose the best one. So we'll know in 3 or so years. The Games Production Fund, which is the other game one that we started this year, the first round of that is closing in July, on July the 2nd, which we'll look at in a moment. And there'll be a series of games production rounds over the next few years. The other fund which is relevant to you guys is the Multi-Platform Drama Fund. Now for the film guys, this is the one that's more relevant because it does encompass traditional narratives but delivered in you know, unconventional ways. So multi-platform is hard to define because basically we define it by what it isn't. It isn't TV shows, it isn't films, it isn't games. But what it is things that are delivered usually online. They might be interactive novels, interactive storybooks, they might be other sorts of interactive experiences, but they're not specifically games. They might be web series that go out on YouTube, they might be something that goes on ABC iView if maybe you have some relationship with the ABC as well. In addition, we also have a sector building fund. We have some money over 3 years which we'll use to develop the sector through sponsorship of screen events like Free Play Convention down in Australia, the Games Convention that runs down in Australia, down in Melbourne, the Games Convention, and also maybe tours that we'll get overseas developers to come around and hopefully tour some developers and hopefully get some value for all sorts of organisations around the country. The last one here is Multi-Platform Extensions. This is a fund that we have which basically funds advertising or co-marketing campaigns for other sorts of TV or films that we have funded. So this is kind of, it's a smaller fund, it's not one that you can apply to basically if you have a TV show or a film that we have funded, then we start talking to you about doing multi-platform extensions, which might be, you know, a game that is used as a marketing device for your particular show or something like that. So that's all pretty boring. We have 4 key objectives here: promote growth and sustainability, support the development of new IP, skills renewal and retention, and the opportunities of fast broadband, which is, you know, all about the NBN and all about, you know, new digital distribution channels. This is tons of stuff. This is all that same thing. I'm going to go really quickly here today because I'm sure that some of this is going to be more or less important for you guys. Now, the production funding round that we've got coming up for the Games Fund, Game Production Fund, as I say, it closes on the 12th of July. We have about $2 to $2.5 million that we're looking at in that fund. We will fund up to $50,000 for a particular project, and the funds are for production, not pre-production or prototyping. Now, the film people here, you call pre-production development. We call production, in games we call production development as well. So you've got to be careful.
500 or 50?
Yeah. Sorry, up to 500.
Sorry, okay.
Oh, did I say
We
50?
thought you'd actually not done that.
Sorry.
Just to clarify.
Up to 500.
Okay.
If it's under 50, it's a grant.
Got it.
If it's above 50 and up to 500,
Got
it's in recoupable investment. Now, are you guys in Screen Queensland, is yours a recoupable investment or is it a grant at that point?
You know, it's really going to depend. I think it's probably, you know, it's development. It's probably going to be a lot of it is development, so it
Yeah.
might be a recoupable development expense, as in film and TV.
Yep.
So, but beyond that, it'll be negotiable depending on the project and the
TBD.
scale of it. I mean, if it's a $60,000 project, we put 50K in, that would be an investment.
Yeah.
If it's a $5 million project, it's 50K. It may be a
Yeah,
grant.
we'll just let that one go. Okay. We have about $4 to $5 million in this fund per year. Now, this is per financial year, so the first round of this is coming up next month. There'll be another round closing next February. So there'll be 2 rounds a year in the Game Production Fund. We've obviously already done one enterprise round. We'll be doing another enterprise round next year, which is really for established companies that have been going for a while and have, you know, released a number of games. So that's probably not very relevant for you guys, I imagine, at this point. The last thing here, the applicants may get less than they requested. So, you know, it's a flexible funding round for us in as much as we will determine whether we can fund you guys at a lower amount. I think that there are some state agencies I've heard of which, if they don't think that the money is the right amount, that they won't fund you at all on that basis. I think Victoria did that for a little while, but in our case, we're happy to, you know, look at different amounts of funding rather than just the amount that you actually asked for. Now, eligibility will be the big thing. If you guys are thinking about coming in for one of these funds, what we don't have anymore is marketplace attachments, because a lot of the time developers will be basically self-distributing and self-publishing their work. You'll put it straight on the App Store, or you'll be putting it, you know, straight out to your consumers. So instead of having a marketplace attachment, what we look for here is experience that you're coming with. So effectively you need, in the case of game production, you need 2 experienced developers. Either they're sole developers who've done a couple of games on their own, or they're people who've worked as senior developers on large games. So when we say senior developer, it's someone who's a lead or a senior artist or programmer or designer or producer on a game that has come out, that has actually been released. If this one here is called the LA Noire clause, unfortunately. I wish there was a pointer on this, probably somewhere. Yes. So this one here is the LA Noire clause, which is 2 years senior experience on a large game. Basically, so a bunch of people got caught up in this where they worked on LA Noire for like 5 years and they came out of it with 1 game credit, and, you know, some of them didn't get a credit at all because they got shafted in the end. So we want to make sure that people, you know, who have been through the development process for a long period of time are actually eligible. Applications are due in July, which isn't too far away. All of the application materials are there. So, I mean, this might be a bit premature for some of you guys, but in the long term, these are funds that we hope to run for 3 years. So, you know, you guys might be working on projects that you think, you know, maybe you're not ready now, but maybe you're ready in a year or two to come in and ask for funding for them. The last kind of stuff here I'll talk about here is what we look to see in a game's production application. So the first thing we have here is an EPOC, an electronic proof of concept, not the game from Canberra. And this is a prototype or an animated gameplay video. It's something that shows us what the game is. It might be a playable prototype, it might just be a video, but we want to see what the core mechanic of the game is. What is the thing that the player does? What is the hook that gets them into the game and gets them to play it? We also like to see a game design document, a production schedule, a milestone schedule. The marketing and publishing release plan is what Brian was talking about here, is how you plan to actually get people to know that your game exists and then sell them your game. How do you plan to monetize your game? Like, is it going to be free to play with in-app purchases? Are you going to try to sell a premium up front for, you know, $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $20? What is your plan for that, and on what basis have you reached that plan? And that will tell us whether, you know, whether this thing is a viable business concern, because to a large extent the Games Production Fund is looking for viable commercial games. It's not a cultural program to that extent. It's more of a commercial program. That's not to say that we won't look at games that have large cultural kind of goals to them as well, and don't have a commercial goal. But the foundation of the fund here is on the commercial side. I'm going to skip all this stuff because it's kind of boring. This is some additional things here. One thing that's important is a pitch video. We asked for like a Kickstarter style video where you basically pitch your game. You tell us what it's going to be all about, and you can combine this with the other aspects, the EPOC or the animated gameplay video. Game design documents. If the game people here, I guess you would be taught about game design documents. Yes? They know how to do game design documents? Yes? Excellent. If you know how to do a game design document, we require one for this fund. On the assessment side, we have normally 4 assessors. With the game production round, we're expecting, just to give you guys a bit of perspective, we had 30 applicants for the enterprise round. We're expecting maybe 60 applications for the games production round in this first round, and none of the enterprise guys can apply for this. Well, none of the successful enterprise guys can apply for this. So we may end up having more than just 4 assessors on this. We may need a lot of assessors on it. And the assessment process takes about 10 weeks generally. Now, I'm not going to talk through here all the assessment, how we go about the assessment. Normally we would, but there's too much. So we're going to go back quickly to look at the terms of funding. Couple of quick points. We won't fund more than 75% of the budget. We like the developer to come with some of their own equity in it, so we try not to fund more than 75%. As I say, funding over 50,000 is an investment. Funding under 50,000 is a grant. We take a share of the copyright here, which means kind of everything and nothing. It means that you can't go and just sell the game to someone else for no money or for tons of money without our approval, basically. And we have approval over key elements of the game at this point. And this is basically so that we make sure that you are actually going and executing the plan that you came to us with. You make the game that you told us you're planning to make, and you make it with the people you told us you were planning to make it with. Also, if you go get a publisher, we have approval over that to make sure you don't get shafted on that deal as well, if that maybe is going to happen. Now, this is the other fund. This is a multi-platform fund. So this is more for the film people, if you're interested in this sort of, in the other side. Basically, again, multi-platform is all the things that aren't filmed, aren't TV, they aren't games. So, as I say, interactive storybooks, YouTube series, things like that. Again, up to 500,000. I make that same mistake every time. And $3 million per year. 2 rounds of this a year. And again, successful applicants may get less than requested. They might get more if there's some reason for it or some requirement for it as well. Now, again, there's a couple of things here. So, games, film, and TV, as I say, are not eligible, right? So you can't, if you fit into one of the other funds, you can't apply to this fund effectively, because it's so hard for us to define what multi-platform is. It's kind of an exclusionary fund that's it's whatever's left over when you're not fitting into the other ones. As I mentioned down the bottom, the previous marketplace requirement is gone from this fund as well. Previously, you had to come with an attachment, whether it was ABC or SBS or someone who was going to then distribute your content. You don't need that anymore. We have a lot of people coming in now with multi-platform applications which are for YouTube series, where they're going to put it straight up on YouTube as well. Now, the one difference between the Games Fund and the multi-platform fund is this is slightly less commercially driven. There might be more of a skills building kind of goal here for the people who are involved in it. So they might be doing a web series that we don't imagine that they'll make money on straight off, but we might be putting it out there for them to build an audience that later on they can start to build on as filmmakers or as comedians or whatever it is that they're planning to do. Applications here, we're looking at a September close for this one. We're not quite sure of this. We haven't announced the actual date yet, but it's not far away. Again, we have an electronic proof of concept, so a trailer, a video of something that will show us what your thing is going to be. A pitch video here, again, the Kickstarter style pitch video where you talk to camera and you tell us about it. You can kind of combine these two video elements if you want to. Marketing and release plan, again, how you plan to get your audience, how you plan to monetize them, if you plan to monetize them, or is it just going on YouTube and you'll get whatever monetization you get off YouTube. Business impact statement here is what it does for you guys as a business. Is it going to build an audience that you plan to monetize later, or is it going to generate money on its own? And measurable targets. So the KPIs will be how many, what is the audience that you hope to attract with this particular project. Again, I'm not going to go through all the assessment requirements here. If you want, I'm happy to send you these later, so come and see me and I can send them out. Again, we don't like to fund more than 75% of the budget. Funding under $200,000 here is a grant. Funding over $200,000 is a recoupable investment. We take a share of the copyright as we discussed before, and we have the same approval over the key elements of it. And that is it. So we're going to talk more freely now, now that I've bored you with all that.
I was just thinking that maybe we could put something on our site where people could download maybe this or something, so it might be easier for everyone. So you can just go onto the Screen Queensland site and just take that information, because knowing that criteria is probably going to be really, really, really helpful. Look, I might just kind of ask Morgan a couple of things, because now we know you're the recipient of the enterprise funding.
Yes.
Kind of, what's your experience working with Screen Australia? What are some of the things that you funded, and what can you do now? Hopefully it's going to be all good. But yeah, no, I'd be interested to hear about your business and name some of the things that you've done in that space.
So we've got a reasonably long history with Screen Australia. We've worked on a co-production that was funded by Screen Australia for a proof of concept about war journalism. That was a game called Warco that we worked on with Robert Connolly and Tony Minatti. So people from the journalism space, the film space and the game space working together in a collaborative fashion. That was the first project we did where there was funding from Screen Australia. That wasn't to define it directly, but that was a good example of the sort of things that I think are a real opportunity in the Australian space. We had some good skills across all of those areas, and it was really a native games project that brought in skills from all those places.
What fund was that through at the time?
That was through the old production fund, I think.
Like a Digital Ignition or one
No,
of
it
those,
wasn't
or-
Digital Ignition. It was before Digital Ignition was in the mix. So that
We
was
tend to change the names of the funds every year
Yeah.
to
Yeah, exactly.
really confuse.
Just keeps everyone on their toes.
I'm trying to remember what that. I think it was Games Production, but yeah. We then received $50,000 as a grant for a game called Heroes Call from the Digital Ignition Fund. And the Digital Ignition Fund was really built to do the same sort of things that the state agencies are talking about doing now, to kickstart the early part of a project. so that you could then take it on to funding. But we had also funded that internally, so 50,000 was enough for us to get that to market, and that was quite successful for us, so that did well. And now enterprise is about funding the business in Slate and moving that forward over the next 3 years. So it gives us a bit more comfort to focus on building our own IP and taking that to market in a much more advanced state than we would otherwise. In some cases we're completing work, in some cases we'll be going and talking to publishers, but at a sufficiently advanced stage where we hold the cards. And to give a little bit of background, I'm not sure how many people know how the games industry models work, and that used to be a very clean process and isn't so much now. It used to be a publisher-driven industry, so publishers handled distribution, they handled funding, they worked with the developer would pitch a title, that would be funded, and there would be a long and bitter fight over the IP.
What kind of budget levels would they have been?
So-
or are they? I mean, I know
In the
you
old
say,
days or now?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Well, actually, probably now. I suppose. Like, what? I suppose in those days. Well, I suppose it's got a comparison between then and now, and how it's
Yeah.
changed,
In,
really.
in the golden age,
Yeah.
it was up to about 10 mil.
Wow.
And 10
And they
mil,
funded all of that.
and they would fund all of
Right.
that, and generally hold the IP.
Right.
And I would say that there was a reasonable amount with good solid returns. You could sell enough units to make back your 10 million.
Yeah.
There was room for a lot of players in the mix.
But as a producer, as a creator, you didn't get any. Your upside was
Limited.
limited. Got it.
You generally had to earn back your advance,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that involves selling a lot of copies. So
Right.
the publisher would make
Okay.
their money back well before you take your money
Yeah.
back. And we're talking here about the sorts of games you might see in an electronics boutique. So the
The
games,
old console games.
the old
yeah.
console games. Now, when you're talking about like a Call of Duty or a Halo or a Grand Theft Auto, budgets on these games climb up to and over 50 million to 100 million.
How's that gone up?
Substantially.
Well, we never made those games here.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
okay.
that's
That
right.
was
Yeah.
not our market.
Right.
We were solidly second tier.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. With the exception of LA Noire, which was probably 15-ish,
Right.
20,
No.
20,
No.
25,
Oh.
30. So yeah, I know they
They
did spend a lot of money.
They spent a lot of other people's money.
Yeah. And this is the interesting thing about this business. This business is entirely predicated, at least in Australia, on other people's money. So most of the companies involved in this business were owned by American publicly traded companies. This has become much, much more hit-driven. So you spend 50 million, you then spend another 50 million on marketing, and if you Call of Duty, you make $1 billion in your opening week. So the
So
biggest products,
So it's kind of like the film's tentpole movie.
that's exactly right. If you're not in that #1 slot, you probably didn't make money. And
Right.
that's so it's become a real big bet.
That's what
in
we're
this-
talking about with the Tomb Raider game.
Yep, absolutely. Sold 8 million copies at $100 a piece and didn't break even.
Wow.
But still a much better risk than film, probably.
Well, look, I think they're doing what they can to try and limit the risk, and a lot of the same things are happening. So while this hit-driven industry has crept up and kind of closed out a lot of the opportunities for smaller developers, a lot of opportunity has opened up in the mobile space, in the PC downloadable space, and here we're talking about budgets that go anywhere from, let's say, 50K up to about 2 million.
Yeah.
And these are games that can make returns varying. We can talk about the crazy outliers like Angry Birds or Clash of Clans. Clash of Clans was doing about $2 million a day in revenue not that long ago. But they probably spent 3 or 4 million building that, and that's a mobile title. Angry Birds has obviously got IP that's worth a massive amount. But I think in realistic terms, what you can say is you can make a competent game for mobile at between 50 and 200K and expect to make a return of zero to $1 million, in depending on how that's put together.
Seems like nothing's changed in the film industry.
Exactly. So, but these are reasonable spaces to
Yeah,
work
yeah.
in,
The
and
thing is,
Yeah, I know.
yeah, you don't have any gatekeepers anymore though.
That's exactly
You're not-
right.
You don't
So-
have to worry about distribution, but you have to worry about getting your audience
Yeah.
now. So, you know, they're not.
Yeah, I think that's the really interesting part about it though. I mean, how do you, I mean, I suppose stepping it back a bit, you've got money from, you've got some development funding from, you know, some seed funding from the state agency, you've got some funding from Screen Australia. Who funds the gap? Or is there a gap?
Okay, so
Yeah.
one thing that we're trying to do with Screen Australia is align ourselves with all the state agencies. So the
Right.
state agencies do the prototype funding,
Right, okay.
which would be ideal for us, and then we, because we have comparatively a larger amount, we can fund completion funding. So what we'd like
Right.
to see is a lot more games getting funded at a lower levels by
But
the
getting
state
made.
agencies, and then we will look at them at a later stage where
Mhm.
they've got an electronic proof of concept, and then we fund them. So with that, then hopefully the developers have some money in there,
Mm.
and hopefully there's enough there that you can finish the game on those budgets. Your own money that you're bringing, maybe because you've done a few games and you have raised some revenue through those. Some state agency money that you've got your prototype done with, and then some development money or some production money that we come with two
Yeah.
just before I get to you,
Yes,
just
yeah.
Run
behind you.
behind.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
I was just because you were saying that you're only going to give 75% of
Yeah.
the budget, so that 25%, the people have got to
Yep.
bring that to the table. Where are they
That's-
getting their
that's
funding? And
state?
but if the state funding body are only doing the development, does that kind of make
That's
up?
Yeah, that's part of that. You'll
Yeah,
have some
25%.
sweat equity that your team will put in building a prototype, right? No one maybe is paying you to do that other than that you're spending a bunch of your time that you would otherwise be, I don't know, watching TV or whatever people do. That I don't have time for that anyway, but no, I have far too much. But and then at the same time, there are other things that you will do. You know, you might be providing office space or insurances or all sorts of things that you will contribute to the actual production. Sorry.
Is there, just a question, is there any idea of extending Quape into that area?
Quape is only for film productions.
Yeah, well,
There are ongoing discussions all the time. The Game Developers Association of Australia, I know, are lobbying fairly hard for a producer's kind of whatever it's called.
Offset.
Producers
The offset,
offset.
yeah.
Does everyone know what the Quape is?
So the idea is with films, producers get like an
Qualifying
Yeah.
Stream
Australian
production
standard,
expenditure.
yeah, they get
You
an
get a
amount
rebate.
of the production budget back.
Yeah.
If games did this, it would make the
Yes.
whole thing
Yeah.
a lot more profitable or affordable, really. But only 20-30%
Yeah,
more.
yeah, yeah.
But I mean, it represents we Australian developers are competing with Canada and America. America has a massive kind of built-up infrastructure of developers there, where all the big companies are, and all the ones that aren't there are now in Canada because there are tax rebates from the Canadian government and then local rebates from a couple of cities, which make it very cost-effective to set up in Canada. We don't have any of that here in Australia. And we used to be cheap because the dollar was at 65 cents, and we were suddenly not cheap because the dollar was at, well, $1.05. Obviously the dollar's come down a bit now, which is good for local developers, and it's good for the industry, but it's never going to get back down to where it was. So we're never going to be competitive on on an international basis with the dollar at high levels, and without any kind of, competitive tax rebates. So we have to really stand on our own 2 feet, and that's what the film industry has recognised, and that's why they offer the Quape. And a lot of film producers who would otherwise not be able to make films can make money on their film.
Just quickly, can people up the back hear okay? Because I haven't been passing the mic around, so I'll give up on that.
Yeah. Sounds like
we
we're
can
okay.
talk loud. Sorry, you had another question.
Just on the digital strategy for the producers offset, I actually followed that up with Mike and the other Screen Australia, some people in the marketing side
Yep.
of Screen Australia, and it depends on what it is and what activity is when you do it. So it's not to be confused with digital created content versus marketing content. So it is Quapeable.
We get
One
Quape on
when it-
multi-platform. We'll
Yeah.
get Quape on multi-platform.
Yeah.
We're talking to we're looking at assessments right now, and one of them is it's a web series that will likely qualify for Quape. And a lot of the TV, the ABC, the normal TV series, will qualify for that. But on the game side, nothing yet,
And if you develop your game, so you've actually got, you've given some of your time, you've got your budget there, you've actually put in your time, didn't pay yourself a salary or whatever else, you've got some money off Screen Queensland and Screen Australia. How do you get that out in the marketplace, and who do you work with to get that out there? Firstly in Australia, and what about the international market? How do you kind of do that and make money?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. There are many options, but I think it's worth talking about, what is the broad financial breakdown for, say, a mobile or a console or a commercial title. And these days, you're still looking at getting about 40% of your money's going to come from the US.
Right.
So sales. There are very few. You're very, very rarely doing geographical distribution deals. So
Right.
It's not like film.
It's changed,
yes,
right,
so
okay.
there are exceptions to this. You might do that for China, and for weird reasons, you might do that for Germany. But generally speaking,
And maybe Korea.
and Japan. So generally speaking, the English-speaking world you distribute to yourself. Now you might work with a publishing partner, or you might work on your own, but you'll distribute to all those territories close to simultaneously.
We're talking for
And
mobile, right? You're talking
for
iOS,
mobile,
Google
or for
Play,
PC, or Steam,
Amazon Store.
Amazon Store.
So these are all platforms that you as a producer or
Yeah.
as a developer can get directly to your customer
Right.
by
Yeah.
going through those channels, except for Steam.
Yeah.
Steam, there's a gatekeeper in the way, so Steam isn't a guarantee that you'll use that. But all the other ones, you can just make your game, assuming that your game is bug-free and complete, you can put it on these platforms and people can theoretically see it and buy it, except for Discovery, which is
And that's where you run into issues in that there are, I don't know whether anybody's looked at the App Store, but there's a lot of apps. Like really a lot of apps, like some number of thousands released every day, number of
Wow.
apps. So the question is, how do you stand out from the mix? There's a couple of ways. One of the positives of that is that of that couple of thousand, 1,994 are terrible. So not being terrible.
we don't fund them.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
not anyone else, not our ones.
Not being terrible is a good start. But there are opportunities to work with the various platform holders. So you can work with Apple, you can work with Google to get promotion through that. You can buy promotion in other apps. You can do marketing and advertising. I would say that for Australian companies in that space in general, you have a really good opportunity because Australia is a very is a good percentage of that market, and it's a great place to get attention. So you can work locally. You don't need to push as many units to start getting on the charts and start getting some attention. There's a really great community in Australia. You can talk to people like Screen Australia, like local screen agencies. You're more than welcome to call up and hassle me, and that can get you, some articles, some attention. And if you can build a little bit of critical mass in Australia, where it's easier, you're not fighting it against the enormous fire hose of titles. If you can build a bit of critical mass here, that gets you noticed by the platform holders, and that gives you a good opportunity to then launch into North America well, launch into Europe well, and go through those steps. That's been a really successful option for us. We've always found, even though Australia is not our biggest market,
Yeah.
we treated it as our best market, and that leads on to success in other territories. So, and if you have a success here, it's very easy to, no problems finding a partner for China. If you've got a game that's successful, no problems
Can you
getting
get the
into
money
Korea.
out of China though? I mean, that's, I don't know any awful,
Well,
but can you get, to make sure that if you actually do that and you sell it, are you getting that money?
We get
Yeah.
money out of China,
Good.
but we pay the get money out of China tax in
Right.
a number of steps to make it happen.
Sorry,
Yes.
just behind you, the girl here in the
Is it me?
scarf. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
sorry,
were
I
waiting
think so.
before.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it might be an ignorant question. Okay, so in TV you have a concept, you've got your broadcaster, a
Yeah.
distributor, they put money into it to help you kind of make the project.
Yep.
Is there an option like that in the gaming sort of world? Like I know Screen Australia is offering to give money and Screen Queensland, but is there sort of any other platform or
Look,
that
the
you-
truth of the matter is there used to be, and now, if you're
Not for
asking
ideas, though,
if you're
right?
asking the question, the answer's no.
Yeah.
Because ideas are worth nothing. right?
But-
Well, if
but
you're coming with a
No,
package though, the same
Yeah,
sort
no,
of
that's
concept.
exactly right.
That's a very
like-
good question. Is
Yeah.
the publisher model dead? I think what
Yeah.
you're asking me.
It's
You're
dead.
saying the old model was publishing where you got like a distribution advanced kind of.
It's deadish for new players.
Is it?
So
Yeah.
publishers right now are playing
Right.
very, very conservatively,
Mm.
and they're
Yeah.
pretty much exclusively dealing with people that they've had relationships with for the last 5 years, of which there are almost none left,
Yeah.
because that industry's got terrible. So, so there are a lot of people making very, very conservative plays. That said, there are, once you've got something with a little bit of traction, opportunities start to come up along those lines.
There are publishers that exist.
There are
They're-
publishers,
They're
it's
not
just
going to
hard to
look
get
at
in.
you at the start unless you've got a proven track record. You know, you've
Yeah.
released a game that's done very well. But at that point, you should be not
Right,
needing them.
that's right,
You
yeah.
know, so you know,
And there are
to-
mobile publishers as well, but mobile
there's-
publishers are far less likely to front cash. Their
there's-
model
there's
currently is
Chilingo
not about
and-
fronting cash.
Can I ask, I mean, what happens in the film and television business is if you're not an established producer, then
Mm.
the only way you can get a pre-sale or a pre-commitment is if you've got some extraordinary elements, some, known property
Yeah.
or some star, so
Yeah.
if you apply that principle to games and you have some extraordinary property or something, with some access to some property or brand,
Mm.
is that going to get you a deal, even though you're not established? I mean, if you can go and if you know somebody who controls a big brand or a big property,
Yeah.
is that going to get you access to a publisher or not?
Well, do you
You
need it?
want to show
The-
development experience in that sort of case.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you
you
could
need
do
developed experience as
you
well,
could do
but-
something on the mobile front
Yeah.
in that case. But I would say that generally, like your best avenue these days.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit earlier about Free Play, which is a large independent games festival that runs down in Melbourne. That's your equivalent of an independent film festival.
Yeah.
You can go there, show your stuff,
Or at PAX, you can
get
take your
attention.
game to PAX and,
Take
you know.
go to
But
festivals
what's
like PAX.
PAX is the Penny Arcade Expo, which they're running in Melbourne this year.
Oh,
So I think it's their first
It's
international
their
one.
first
So they have so Penny Arcade is an online comic which turned into a forum community sort of
Yeah,
thing, and then
yeah.
they did an expo, and then that got huge, and now they're doing one in Melbourne. So it's like a large kind of geek culture expo
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
thing. Not quite as nerdy as Comic Con's got
No.
geek culture as well.
Yeah.
PAX is more on the game side rather than the comics and film side. But it's a place where developers will go to show their games. But you need to have the game, right? You can't just go there with the property. But that's a way of reaching journalists and some potential customers
Yeah.
all at the same time. One thing though is that a lot of the old developers the old publishers don't exist for
Yeah.
these developers, and a lot of the elements that you put normally don't exist anymore as well. So you can't just get a film star and
Yeah, I understand.
and a
Yeah.
star writer, and so
Yeah.
it's really difficult to make that analogy. And the other thing, as I say, like there's no value in a game idea. Unfortunately, it's only in the execution of the idea. So two development teams will treat an idea, whatever it is, the same way. I mean, you can look at the way developers the world over have approached the endless runner genre. Which maybe started with Cannabolt or something, right?
Cannibal, yeah. At least in
And
the
then
modern-
there's Subway Surfer, and then there's Ski Safari, and then there's all these games that
Tic
have
Tac Joyride and
Temple
Temple
Run.
Run.
So there's all these developers that have approached the genre in different ways and made games that a lot of them have been successful, but there are tons of other ones that haven't been. So it's all about the execution rather than the idea.
Oh yeah, but
Can
what
we
I meant, sorry, is that like if you went to them and you've already, you've gone to a developer to help you
Yep.
create sort of a promo and then you took it somewhere.
Yeah, but again, I mean, the money still needs to be spent, and
Yeah.
they're not going to front you the money.
I-
No.
The gentleman.
In the
think,
grey,
like,
correct.
just to add a quick point into that.
You'll get this.
The games industry
We know you're
has
there.
fallen apart completely over the last 5
Yeah.
years and in no way resembles what it used to be. This is partly because it was all publicly traded companies. The global financial crisis hit them very hard. They disassembled a lot of what they were doing. At the same time, people like Zynga were coming into the mix, Rovio making a ton of money,
And
raising a
competition
ton of
from
money.
competition
There's
from phones,
competition
like all of
from-
the
Yeah, so right now, the answer to all of these questions is it's a bit weird right now. And that may be the future of industry, full stop. Like, I think film's going to go that way. So, yeah, so, will it ever get unweird so that there's a, strict answer to that question? I think the truth of the matter is probably no. We're into weird from here on. So sure, maybe there are ways to get funded. There's no channels. channels have all fallen apart.
Can we
I
just
think-
go? Can we just go to the gentleman in the grey?
It's
Sorry,
so
because he's been
patient.
kind of
That's
so
all right.
patient up there. Sorry,
His
guys.
arm is getting
Yes,
Just
it's
the,
kind of.
I was asking, you
Sorry.
mentioned before about trying to get some local traction before
Yeah.
going to Europe and North America. Would you actually use the say like the App Store to withhold the launch of a title, so you're actually only clicking only Australia button?
Real
To go.
Racing
Yeah.
3
Yeah.
only launched in Australia. They did a soft launch here in Australia. It's a huge international game
Yeah.
obviously from Fireman. They soft launched here in Australia to work out their monetization, right? And they had a lot of feedback from their first launch. They rejigged all their monetization for it because it was the first time that they'd gone free to play on that game. Previously it was a premium title and the new one was free to play instead. And then once they'd settled it down, they went worldwide. And a lot of another technique that a lot of developers are using is launching first on Google Play on the Android, because you can update virtually immediately without any of the process that you have to go through with Apple. So you can make very fast iterations on your game and refine all of your monetization, all of your difficulty, all of your bugs, get them all out on the Android store, and then you go to iOS and you come on the App Store. And you can do the same thing, you can launch in one territory, right? You can do a regional release or a platform release, whatever works for you.
Most of the big developers use Canada because Canada's America-like,
Yeah.
and you can expect the purchase behaviour to resemble the purchase behaviour. Australia is also America-like, and we're local to it. We're in the right time zone. We understand it, so we use it that way. We have thought about using New Zealand occasionally when we want an even smaller sample to launch out.
That's like 3 guys,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Oh.
the trick of the matter.
You're all here.
That's it. They'll get you afterwards. That's it. You do.
I will say
Mark
the trick of the matter there is that if you talk to Apple and Google directly, they will say that they prefer global launches and they prefer you to globally launch with them. But unless it's not your first rodeo, I don't think that's a good idea, and they'll always back you if you're great. So even though they'll say to you, no, we would rather you launch it everywhere, when you say, well, we're
suits
going to have to
them,
be a
right?
little bit careful, we're just going to start off with a little small launch, get attention, get traction, I'm going to come back to you in a month, and it'll be blistering. If you launch on Google, you will have more trouble getting an Apple feature, if that's important to you. So-
Okay. And now we've got. Sorry about that. We've got a gentleman in the middle there.
Just a
and then
question.
we've got the other-
We said the state agencies kind of funding the lower level of productions, and then Screen Australia kind of coming in at the end. What about the Right Pedal Studios kind of model where they sit with you for the production? It's not just a kind of grant and then
Yep.
So that's
leave
an
it to your devices.
accelerator
Yeah.
program. So basically what they'll do is they'll give you they'll give you some money to fund the whole development to monetization, and in return, this is a conversation we had not half an hour ago, they'll take half of the
I
revenue
can't remember the numbers,
and,
but they'll take a
some
block.
percentage of the IP,
Okay.
but they won't own your company. So they're different. They're a business, and their business is funding a bunch of games to hopefully one of them will be a hit.
Yeah.
So by all means, there's John Passfield and those guys up here at Right Pedal. There's I think there's one attached to the AAE in Canberra.
Okay.
There's a few of them around, and they might work very well for people. There's one cohort going through right now up
Yep.
here, so it'll be interesting to see how they go.
I'm a mentor there, so
Okay,
you get good.
Yeah,
you
that
get
was
good
the thing.
advice.
You get all this advice, and
That's
you're
right.
getting it for free.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And just over here.
I have 2 questions. The first one's for Justin, and then the second one's for all of you. Justin, why did documentary get taken out of multi-platform and put into Signature, and why has it only got 200,000 instead of 500,000?
200,000 for the maximum, or 300?
For
I
Signature
have
Fund?
no idea. I wish I could help you. Documentary is its own thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Different to drama, so different that it can't sit
Yeah.
alongside
Well, no,
multi-platform?
documentary is it has. There's a whole different department that handles documentaries in Screen Australia. So obviously, I'm not aware of why it was moved out of. Was it in multi-platform, or was that part of
There used to be interactive, so Mike used to be able to look at Doco as well
Yeah,
as
no, I think the
Diamond.
Doco department requested that the Doco stuff went back to
It's
Docos.
a shame that you knocked $300,000 off it.
Yeah, I guess
Lobby.
it reflects. I guess it would reflect the fact that I'm assuming it would reflect the fact it's not like an entertainment sort of
Yeah.
concept, and therefore there's less money in it. I mean, there has to be some sort of logic there.
I'm sure
along
there's
those
logic,
lines.
that's why I'm asking Justin.
Yeah,
what
no,
he thinks.
look, I'm not aware. I've only been there 4 months, so I can only talk for the games funds, and I wouldn't want to comment on something that I hadn't been involved
No,
in.
fair enough.
And what's the second
And the second question that I had, I guess, is a more broader question about how you retain, I guess, an entrepreneurial spirit within the games culture that, you know, is built on risk, but attaching it to money which is very risk averse and has processes that, you know, I guess the whole, you know, fail fast and fail often, which, you know, I think govern particularly in more casual gaming. How are you going to preserve some of that potential
Your appetite
greatness?
for risk?
Pardon?
Your appetite for risk?
I think they're asking about your appetite
No,
for
your
risk.
appetite.
To which, you know, I would say there are lots of cheap ways to fail fast. So I would say that the goal is you spend as much as you can get your hands on to build up a critical mass of failing, and use that to then fail bigger and bigger until you're ready to fail big enough to but no, I think you have to take that attitude away.
I mean, well, you know, it's famous that Rodeo made 57 games before they made Angry Birds.
Yeah,
Like,
they
it
got,
wasn't like
and
they
they ripped out Angry Birds off from another game. So
Exactly.
you know, like,
But those games didn't make no money either.
okay,
So they didn't make Angry Birds money. Angry Birds is
No.
worth 50 billion. So
And
none of their
now going
previous
into
stuff was.
television.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
the
So
film,
revenge,
TV.
yeah.
Exactly. So they didn't take a lot of funding. Each one of those gained a little bit of traction for the next one, for the next one, for the next one. One blew up.
So one
And I
of the
think, you know, it's a hit-driven industry.
Yeah.
So if you can hit a hit, that's great. But there are lots of ways to break even as you go and diffuse the risk as much as possible. But I do think you have to head into it. Yeah.
And
We're
now the
gonna do
questions
some of
up the back here. Yes.
Sorry, just a question. So I know that you said Screen Australia takes 1% of the copyright, and I know Right Pedal's quite happy for you to buy copyright back. Does Screen Australia only does it allow you to buy it back, and is it only once they've made money back from you?
Oh, such a good question. We have weekly discussions about our contracts at this stage. They are so interesting. Basically, when we are a recoupable investment, we recoup our money at the proportion that we invest, right? So if we invest 40% and you invest 60%, when the revenue comes in, we take 40%, you get 60%. There's a couple other bits and pieces there, but it's really boring. Once we got 100% of our money back, we drop down to 50% of our entitlement. Okay, so we say, oh, look, you know, you can have some more now. We've got our money back, but we're going to keep recouping some more. Theoretically, we recoup, or we have, our contract lasts 7 years, and then we just say, it's all yours, we're out of here. I'm not sure whether there is a trigger in there for you to buy it back entirely. It's all, at that stage, it's usually just a discussion. It's like, hey, you know, do you want to just sell it to us or whatever, you know? And then it's a discussion that happens with it, between the two parties of the contract, right? It's like any other contract. It's negotiable as long as the two parties agree to whatever the deal is at that point. But as I say, our contracts aren't finalised for the production round, certainly. We certainly want to finalise them for enterprise pretty soon.
Yeah, I was going to say I have no idea. I should know something about that.
Yeah, we're
going to contract. So
Over the weekend.
I think it's all negotiable. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
money talks. You know.
Yeah, I mean, if you,
I mean-
if you got to oodle some money in there, and look, if you wanted to sell it, right, on the copyright side, and it's a great deal, we'll just say yes. We really, I don't think we care that much about success, you know. other than-
Copyright's really about you. I mean, I think this is the probably basic because you can have 1% of copyright, and that just allows you, like, if you want to go off and do something crazy with it because you put that investment in, you can't really do it whilst you remain a copyright holder.
And it's
because
only
you
to stop
have that.
someone, for
Yeah.
example,
Mm.
I I think I
Yeah.
termed it in
Yeah. Yeah.
poorly earlier, but
Yeah.
it's just to stop you getting a really bad deal or to try to, for example, sell the IP to someone else for not its market value, right?
It's kind of
At that point, we just have an approval which says, yes, this is a good deal or a bad deal. And the same with going out and getting a publisher partner or something like that.
And also protecting the equity money too, because if someone's put equity into something, they've got to actually make sure that that money's going to go in and,
Yeah.
and
Well,
where it's supposed to go.
I think there's a perennial confusion between
Yeah.
copyright and distribution rights.
Yeah.
Copyright per se is not really worth anything
Yeah.
other than a legal mechanism of protecting you in contractual arrangements. The
Yeah.
thing that's worth the money is the distribution rights, the rights to get the dough when you
Yeah,
sell
the
it.
revenue.
So that is underpinned by copyright. The copyright per se isn't really worth anything. So that's a distinction. At the end of the day, I mean, any party, the thing when you're dealing with a public party, you know, we're not commercial, you know, we have a mandate to try and support people to get their creative works into the market and be successful. If we can get some or most of our, or all of money, that's fantastic.
We're
But
pretty happy with
generally,
all
a,
that money.
That's right. It
generally
would
a
just-
public party will be very compliant if you say, hey, we want to make a bid to buy the property back. But at some point, if they luck onto something that's really successful as a public funder, they're not necessarily going to say, oh yeah, you know, we've got 1 in 100 projects that's making money, we're going to sell it back to you. I mean, duh, you know. So even public parties
So
aren't that
just a
silly.
quick question, in terms of the copyright, is there somewhere, for instance, if you write a script, you register your script somewhere, is there any way you do that?
No, other than that you've written, see the copyright in games, because it exists in so many different forms, it exists as a design document, it exists as the playable version of the game, it exists in the source code, there isn't a place that you can register that other than that you will have you'll have all of the rights that exist at the time that you create each one of those pieces of the game. Which actually, if you guys are thinking about games here and you're thinking about coming in and doing games, you need to make sure that you have contracts worked out with all of the people who are involved in it, because you might have people coming in doing your design work, your character design work, your programming, and all these sorts of things, and you might not have thought about contracts because you're all buddies and everything's fine, but some point later down the track, anything could happen, and what you need to be able to do to demonstrate to us at Screen Australia is that you have what's called chain of title, and this is something that the film industry has a great deal of experience with, but game developers don't. And basically it means that you have tied up all of the rights to all of the people who have worked on the project and have contributed to it, whether it's the game design, the character design that goes into it, whether it's programming, you know, all of those elements that are your game project. You need to have the rights to those things, and when we fund you, we will go off and do what's called a chain of title search. Lawyers get involved, and they will go through and make sure all this, all the chain of title of the project has been done properly, that you do have all the rights, otherwise we can't fund it, right? So that is one thing to keep in mind early. I don't know if you guys had any experience there?
We're well, not
Yeah.
in anything going awry, but we've got pretty good contracts there that
Yeah,
are
so
sorted out.
there are probably contracts available
Yeah,
around.
there are.
I believe there are example contracts that you can get.
We were just saying, Jenny and I were just discussing, we're just this year in Screen Queensland generally, we're starting to put a little bit of money into assistance of legal costs, up to a couple of grand or so. And so that helps you, because obviously, as Justin's saying, we need a clear chain of title, and we appreciate it can be expensive to go out and get the necessary contracting to make sure you've got a secure base for your business opportunity. So
And by way of a cautionary tale, I was talking to a developer recently who had a contract with one of the people who worked on his project, and that person ended up, the game came out, it was relatively successful, and that person ended up pulling out of the contract, and they weren't able to sell that game anymore. They had to take it down. They, you know, so it's worthwhile making sure that you get your contract sorted out and that you ensure that they're watertight.
What's that documentary, that feature documentary?
Indie
on
movie.
independent guys?
Indie movie,
Yes.
yeah. It happened to the guy who did
Indie
Fairs.
film,
Yeah.
whatever it's
Yeah.
called.
Indie game.
Indie game.
Yeah, great movie. Really
Yeah.
great movie.
Now, I might just take the last question because we're just about to finish. So I've got one more up the back. Here we
I feel
go.
like we've
Thank
got so
you.
much more.
We're going to do networking, so there's a bit of, you can go and talk to everyone outside, I think we're kind of
Where
here
you
running out of
guys are
time.
talking down now,
Yes.
it seems like that middle market and the premium AAA title market has evaporated in Australia as far as development
Yeah,
goes.
we don't do that here anymore.
So do you think with the release of these two latest consoles, the middle market might edge back in a little bit?
Oh well, as an indie platform at a low budget, yes. The the 3 to $15 million budget range for development here in Australia is gone. It doesn't exist anymore because people don't buy those games. So they're either playing on their phone or they're playing Call of Duty. So and we're not competitive enough to make those worthwhile. And on the new platforms, they should have hopefully an indie channel or a low budget kind of channel where it is digital distribution, and that's where we can maybe be competitive.
So my answer to that is that indie budgets are creeping up. So for a long time there wasn't any budget but the flagship budget. So yeah, and that started out at about 5 mil, and over time that crept up to 10 mil, and then last generation it started creeping up to 20, 25, 50. But there was no art film kind of band or distribution or anything like that. Since mobile, since Steam, a lot of that's opened up. So budgets there started at 50,000, crept very quickly into the 200s, and now, as you say, you could reasonably think of producing something in the $1 to $2 million range for Steam or for mobile or for downloadable platforms under the right circumstances. And and that budget that window is slowly creeping up as time passes. So yeah, that's right. So we built a games industry that built $10 million games in Australia, and we built it one piece at a time, and that got knocked down a bit, and now we're building one piece at a time. So the answer is that every year you'll be able to fund a game that costs 10 to 15 to 20 to 25% more than the game you made last year. I reckon.
Before we by way of an example, Half Brick, you're all aware of Half Brick and the fruit game, right? So they did work for hire for years, and they used the work for hire money to do a bunch of very small indie games on the PlayStation platform. And they had a little bit of success with those, and then they had a little bit more success, and then they released Fruit Ninja, and then they had tons of success. So they started small, and they ground through a bunch of games, and eventually they were hugely successful. This is like Rovio with Angry Birds as well. So overnight success takes a long time.
And thank you for that. We just have one more comment.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about games. I'd just like to share with you an experience we've got with a group of guys at the moment who've developed a lot of, they've got a good YouTube channel partnerships, and they're producing a lot of little segments in comedy and weird kind of stuff. And some of you know the properties, Beach Stars and Bondi Hipsters and Trent from Punchy. And it's a really interesting model, because we've been talking about games, so let's just talk for a moment about the other area that is that these guys are getting a gazillion hits out there, as a lot of you know better than I do. And the TV stations, particularly ABC, and digital channels, are monitoring this and internationally and saying, hey, these guys are getting a lot of hits. So they're reverse engineering it, obviously, into TV content, often short-form TV content. So it's a very democratic way of getting short-form TV content up. Now, is that multi-platform? Is it digital? Is it short-form TV? Is it interstitial? I don't care. It's just good business, And it's a new model, and it's, I think, a model that we're going to see a hell of a lot more with all the YouTube channel partners as YouTube channels sort of increasingly monetized. So I think that's a huge area, and I think we might be sat here in 2 or 3 years saying, hey, we used to call that multi-platform, it's just a new form of TV now. But whatever we call it, it's a really interesting space. It cuts out commissioners, it cuts out people who know whether you've got a good idea or a bad idea, and it really democratizes your content. If you can get people to respond, then you're clever and you're successful. I had this discussion yesterday with Screen Australia, with Ruth Harley and all the CEOs of the screen agencies, and people were saying, oh, well, we don't work as a screen agency at that level. We'll only work at sort of higher professional levels, so people who make sort of, X 100,000 an hour. I say, hang on. So the guy who makes a $2 million movie and gets 5,000 people to watch it is a professional. But the person who spends $20,000 and gets 10 million people to watch the bit of content is an amateur.
Yeah.
So as I challenge that particular proposition,
Exactly.
as far as I'm concerned, the person who spends 20k and gets 10 million hits is more professional than the guy who spends millions of dollars and nobody watches it. So I think that paradigm is changing substantially. And I think there's kind of like, you know, all the media convergence review. There's a lot of high-end sort of, you know, very pontificating going on about that. But the bottom line is there is a kind of democratizing of content happening, and the guys we're talking to, and I'm sure some of you are thinking along those lines as well, that's the future, you know, and it's bigger than all of us because it's the democracy of who's watching it, and the people who commission your product are the people who hit, you know, online. And I think it's a really great trend. It's fantastic. I think it's going to revolutionize everything, and I think it's going to change the financial dynamics in the industry as well. So just want to add that because we've been talking a lot about games, and I think that's for me and for us where I think that you know, online content is going, and obviously with what YouTube channels and, you know, iTunes have got obviously a completely different model, but I think that that's where it's going. So it's interesting for us.
Just to pick up on
Yeah.
that, we're actually funding through our multi-platform fund. Well, we've got applications from the Bondi Hipsters, people like Wastelander Panda.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of these web channels and MyTronny and these guys who are huge on
They're
YouTube.
huge.
They are phenomenal.
And it's kind of it's so revolutionary. It's quite, a lot of people in the public find it quite threatening because we can't tell you what's brilliant and what's stupid. It's actually the people who watch it who tell you. So it's really quite a refreshing kind of democracy going on there. You know?
Actually, there's a guy over there that started off in the emerging sector at Open Channel when I was down there called Jihan Ratnatanga, who's actually did such a great YouTube site that they actually employed him. They got him over there, and he's now setting up all the channels in the US. So there's an Australian over there, so which is great. So we're going to try and get him out at some stage. But just on multi-platform, before we wrap up, is there any more questions on multi-platform? Because we've crossed a lot of games. So we just want to make sure that we haven't missed off any important kind of questions out there on multi-platform.
Yes.
Is the TV model in general dead?
Not yet.
Like,
No,
kind of, we've seen a decline in like the amount of seasons shows are getting, especially cable TV. Seems like
Cable TV's going huge.
Yeah, so you see that's like Game of Thrones. And then you see like
Game of Thrones, but they're investing money because they have a channel direct to their market, right? Their market pays them money, they make contact for them, and it goes through. And what it's turning more into is not what's dead is, or what's dying is the old form of broadcast TV where they choose what you watch at what time you watch. And what is happening now is you choose what you watch when you want to watch it, which is why the Arrested Development new series that came out, and they released them all at once, and you could watch them as you want. And all of these HBO are commissioning series. All of these TV channels are getting into the area of making their own content, and they'll release it all because they know that people have a voracious appetite for shows that they want to watch, and they want it all right away. So I think that TV in its old way is dead, but it's just going to be the same thing. We still want to watch it, we still want those experiences, just that we want them on our own terms.
But I think it is going to, it's a good question because it is going to transform the broadcast model. I mean, there's always going to be aggregators of product who can kind of aggregate a large audience and collect large sums of money from sponsors or advertisers. But it is going to change the dynamics. I think, you know, it's a good argument for saying that in 3 to 5 years, you know, Netflix and Google and Apple will be buying all the free-to-air broadcasters in this country because there'll be, you know, the advertiser-driven model will be tiny in relation to the pay-per-view model. And pay-per-view revenues potentially are so vast. I mean, Jenny and I were very involved in the birth of video sell-through and launched most of the catalogues in this country and overseas, some overseas too. And the power of that model revenue-wise is so phenomenal. And the people who are clipping the ticket, you know, the fewer people taking commissions. So the substance behind your question is correct, but those broadcasters will adapt to get into that pay-per-view model because the money's so huge.
So one of the things that we've been talking about in games is the movement of games as a product to games as a service, where you're paying for some form of entertainment over a period of time. And this is what TV turns into. When you're with Netflix, right, you pay your $60 or whatever it is, you know, and you get all of the entertainment that you want. And it's like all these music streaming services now, where basically you just pay a fixed amount and you get entertained. You know,
I've got to come in with a historical anecdote there, which is a curiosity, is the fact that the idea of subscription model for Netflix is really amusing because in the late 1970s, when video rental started, in order to rent a video, you had to go along to the video store and be a member and pay a subscription. So it's really interesting.
It's just
that
a different way of doing it now.
The moment Netflix is saying, I'm going to charge you a subscription to, you know, to pay to download content, I think that's living on borrowed time, as the video business from the 1970s. indicated.
What do you think it's going to go to then?
It was pure pay-per-view. You just, you know, you whack on and you pay your dollar and bang, whatever it is.
No, I
you know.
agree.
Just like video
only,
stores.
Netflix
you know?
only works so long as it's the best aggregator in town.
Yeah.
You know,
It's content.
I'm
They're
not,
filling
I'm
the
not going to
content.
sign up 10.
But
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
but all of them are going for that. It's all
Yeah,
of
they
them
are
are going
for
to the
that.
all-you-can-eat model.
But it's an
you know.
immature model. It's a tiny. It's like it's
Yeah.
a
It's a
very,
sizzler
very
model.
immature model. You're really right at the bottom of the curve. I mean, it's a very, very. I mean, IPTV and VOD is so incredibly immature. The subscription-based model is not going to be around for long. It's early adopters. You get ripped off. You know, you get in there, you get screwed on subscription. Everybody's going to come in. There'll be 50 people offering you the same stuff in 5 years. You ain't going to pay a subscription. They'll be begging you to join, believe me. They won't be paying a subscription.
On that wonderful note, I'd like to thank our panel for their time today, which is
Thank
great.
you very much.